The number one reason Tom Brady can never be that is because he is not undefeated in the biggest moments. I've never seen anything like this. I concede. I have nothing to say. It's the greatest performance I've ever seen. Let's look at this in its proper perspective. I was waiting for what I believed was a Joe Montana moment from Tom Brady to eclipse him over Joe Montana.
Three things that will survive a nuclear holocaust: cockroaches, the earth, and the Montana versus Brady GOAT argument. In order to do it justice, we had to break it into parts. We start with criteria. To even begin to talk about why someone is the GOAT, I need to establish with you the criteria for being the GOAT. The most annoying things I've seen is the common mistake people make when they say, rings aren't everything. If Brady is the greatest because of rings, then Otto Graham is greater than all of them, or Robert Ory is greater than Jordan. Many people use this logic as if it's accurate. And believe it or not, I have heard this most profoundly from talking heads on the biggest sports networks.
I will not say that Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time.
You will not say that.
I will not. I'm not going to make it just about rings, though.
First off, no, rings is not the only criteria to determine how someone is the GOAT. The way a GOAT is determined is done the same way in any sport. Is Jordan the greatest of all time? Well, a Jordan fan will say he has 6 rings and LeBron only has 3. The LeBron fan will annoyingly say, well, with that logic, then Bill Russell is greater than Jordan because he has 11. And the LeBron fan is only saying this because he doesn't have the rings to back it up. So instead of saying LeBron needs to win 6 rings, they'll just try to trivialize the idea of winning championships at all. And then begins the never-ending loop of idiocy over logic, closed-mindedness over common sense. The Jordan fan would then explain that, no, Bill Russell can't be because he's not in the argument. And just like that, the Jordan fan spoke the truest, most accurate thing that can be said. Russell is not in the conversation. But how did Russell, a man with so much winning, get put outside the circle of the best? Here's how. Because to even qualify a player for top 5 GOAT status, rings do not apply until all other criteria has been satisfied. Moving back to football, we can get a short list that's consisting of guys like Peyton, Breeze, Favre, Montana, Marino, Moon, Unitas, Brady, and so on. You get the idea. This is not an official list, just an example. All these dudes are certifiable badasses. They set the league on fire during their years in the NFL. We know Joe and Tom will make it past this category. Like, Tom has 44 game-winning drives. Joe has 28. Fourth quarter comebacks. I love this stat in general, actually. It really shows a quarterback's ability to get it done when things are at the most difficult. Tom has 35. Joe has 26. Regular season passer rating. Tom, 97.6. Joe, 92.3. Regular season yards per game. Tom, 262 per game. Joe, 211. But keep in mind, Tom played in a passing era, so we will call this one a wash. And we'll just do that the same with touchdown passes. Let's talk about interceptions. Tom throws 0.6 interceptions per game. Joe throws a bit more, 0.7, but still great. This one, however, I cannot say is a wash, because Tom has almost double the pass attempts, but only 32 more interceptions. This is a big advantage to Tom on this one. Completion percentage. Tom, 64%, Joe, 63.2%. Well, Tom has more attempts, like I said. The playoffs.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me?
Any quarterback can have a good regular season. Even Carson Wentz once looked like a relevant quarterback. But playoffs is where legends are made. So clearly we know both Tom and Joe are the real deal in the stats department. No one is questioning that. Tom has more games, raising the level of difficulty to maintain good averages, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll say even. If you want more stats, the best site on the planet Earth is Pro Football Reference. Now, I'm not endorsed to say that, it's just that website is essential. Now, let's get to the really good stuff. Personal awards now come into focus. Personal awards is a guaranteed way to gauge a player's value from a guy who played in, let's say, the 70s versus a guy who played in the 2000s. Personal awards show how that quarterback performed against his peers, his own competition in his own time. Surely, if you deserve to be in the greatest debate, you are one of the best of your era. This is a perfect way to be fair to the old guys, and it corrects discrepancies throughout the generations due to changes in rules and developments and innovations in the game itself. So, here you can see all the awards. They both have just ridiculous accolades. Pro Bowls. Joe, 8 out of 12 seasons. That is really good. It means he was quality for at least 66% of the seasons he played. Tom, 14 Pro Bowls out of 17 seasons. 82% of the time Tom is the best of the best. Both great. First team All-Pro. Tom has 3. Joe has 3. First team usually will coincide with an MVP, and they both have 3 as well. Player of the week, player of the month, etc. Tom's got a lot. Now, here's the stats I like the most. How often are you one of the best in the league each year against your peers? Passes completed, Joe was in the top 10 9 times. Tom 14 times. Passing yards, passing touchdowns, they usually work in unison with completions. Also, they have a similar passer rating as well. Interceptions. Joe spent 3 seasons where he was in the top 10 of throwing picks. Not very good. Tom only 1 time. So, let's say that leaves us now with the few elite. Peyton, Brady, Montana, Marino, Unitas, Breeze, and Favre. Winning. The only thing that could separate these guys now has to be winning. Winning is a team accomplishment, of course. But quarterback is the only position where winning is applied to them as if it were a personal stat. The quarterback affects everything in a football game. It's greater than any position, even the head coach. A quarterback can control the clock or field position battle for special teams. He's the only guy on the field that wields so much power in determining the outcome of the game. This is why out of
millions and billions and billions and billions
and millions of kids who play football, the NFL can't even find enough great quarterbacks in order for at least all 32 teams to have an elite guy. Think about that. There's only about 9 or 10 guys who are truly elite for any one football generation. That's insane. It's a rare thing to have, and when you have it, it's precious. This is why they are highly paid and highly sought after. This is why a team will give up multiple years of draft picks just to move up a few spots to get the next Peyton Manning, and a team will give 20% of their salary cap to one guy.
You know what that means? It's the top spot, kid. It's the guy who takes the fall. It's the guy everybody's looking at first, the leader of a team. That's a quarterback.
We all know about Tom owning every playoff record that involves winning games, starting games, most statistics. It's obvious. Now, that eliminates guys like Breeze, Moon, and so on. And that leaves us with Brady, Manning, Favre, and Montana for now. Now it's time for the rings to come in. Now remember, rings were never even brought up, and our current group made it this far in the contest. Well, that eliminates Peyton and Favre, let's say. That leaves us with Montana's 4 rings to Brady's 6. But wait, you say, Bradshaw has 4 rings. Yeah, he couldn't qualify for the first set of criteria, so his rings aren't a factor in this discussion. We have our final 2, and now it's time to debate over everything about them. Intangibles like leadership, motivation, competitiveness, football IQ. We have to look at appearances in the Super Bowl. Why are appearances in the Super Bowl important? Because it shows that quarterback got to the final round many times and wasn't eliminated earlier in the playoffs. I refer back to the Jordan-LeBron debate. LeBron has played in more NBA Finals than Jordan, true, but LeBron only has 3 rings. But if LeBron captured 6 rings, LeBron's more final appearances would be the tiebreaker, and it would declare LeBron James the greatest of all time. But until he can get 6, the discussion is moot.
This is all a moot point.
A moo point?
Yeah, it's like a cow's opinion. Doesn't matter. It's moo.
Besides, LeBron hasn't even passed Kobe, who has 5 rings and 7 appearances. But back in 2013, Many Patriots fans used this exact thinking to declare Brady the GOAT, even though he only had 3 rings to Montana's 4. Their argument was Brady had a better career, bulk numbers, and more Super Bowl appearances. Well, I immediately stopped the presses on that one. No, Brady has to have 4. Joe got 4, so Brady has to get 4. I don't care if Tom played in the next 10 Super Bowls and lost them all. 3 rings won't cut it. You have to get 4. When Tom got his 4th, he surpassed Montana in my opinion. But then there were the naysayers. Well, it took Brady more tries to get to 4. Fair enough. So I backed off that and I told myself, then I will just wait until Brady gets his 5th, and then that will shut everyone up. Surely if he gets one more than Joe, that ends it, case closed. But no, we still have this issue. Why? The 4-0 thing.
And if you go to the game and never lose, I don't think there's a higher calling than that. Never lost a Super Bowl. I'd rather win them all. I'd rather be perfect.
Okay, good for him. And that's also one of the reasons why he's in this discussion, isn't it? You know who else was undefeated? Terry Bradshaw, Troy Aikman, and Eli freaking Manning. And so is Joe Flacco, Trent Dilfer, and Brad Johnson. Okay, come on. I'm just trying to point out how ridiculous this is.
In our minds, that's going to elevate you no matter how many times Brady gets to the Super Bowl. You were 4-0. Is that a fair gauge of talking about greatest quarterbacks of all time?
I don't think it's a fair gauge.
But what this really means, the 4-0 thing, means that he lost all the other times and Brady didn't. He couldn't get there. This is basic math and very, very simple logic. Montana had what is considered one of the top 10 worst playoff performances in history. Guess who's not on that list? Tom Brady. You can find a Tom Brady playoff game where he didn't set the box score on fire, okay? But you're not going to find a game where he was just atrocious either. And even his average games in the playoffs are rare. But somehow Montana is being rewarded for failing to win his conference 8 times out of 12 qualifiable seasons. So Joe won the NFC 33.3% of the time he was responsible for the team. Out of Tom's 17 qualifiable seasons, he won the AFC 9 times.
9 times?
9 times.
9 freaking times in a salary cap league. More than doubled Montana's. That means Tom has won his conference 53% of the time. That is insane and seems almost impossible. But there's something just as crazy as that. Championship game appearances. Brady has played in a staggering 13 times out of 17. I honestly can barely comprehend that. A bad year for Brady is not going to the AFC Championship game. Think about that. A good year for anyone else is getting his team just to a wild card spot. But Brady would feel like a failure if he didn't get to the AFC Championship game. Both Joe and Tom have only missed the playoffs 1 time in control of their team. Let's also not forget, in all the average categories, the longer you play, the more passes you throw, the more difficult it becomes to maintain a high average. More chances for failure means the level of difficulty increases. If anyone told a player his rookie year that you would play in the Super Bowl half the time, they would say, "What, am I only getting to play 3 seasons?" No, tell them they'll play almost 2 decades. That's nuts. Well, I think I made my point on that. The notion that going to less Super Bowls but being perfect is somehow better completely baffles me. Alright, so we got the rings thing out of the way. What's next? So let's look at level of difficulty in the big game. Let's compare each guy's performance in the Super Bowl, the quality of the defenses he faced, and how many moments was the pressure at its greatest. But Montana never threw a pick.
No interceptions.
Yeah. Joe Montana didn't throw a single interception in any of his 4 Super Bowl games.
Well, that's great. It is. It's phenomenal. And that's why I hold Joe in such high regard. He was the man on the big stage. But having that as one of the main reasons to say he's better than Brady is flawed logic. If your point is that it means Joe didn't make a mistake, that's just simply not true. Montana made several bad throws that should have been picked off if they were just caught. That means he did make the mistake, and he was just lucky enough that it was dropped. But people make it sound like Joe was perfect on every throw. No, he wasn't. In fact, the biggest time his perfect interception record would have been ruined, Just happened to be that it would have ruined his perfect record in the Super Bowl as well, leaving him with a 3-1 mark.
Missed opportunity for Lewis Billups. He gets the read here. Taylor driving inside, and Billups with good anticipation knows where that pattern is going to be thrown. He had it. He had it. You can't drop that one. That's your ball out on the 20, and you shut down the drive.
But let me ask you this. Why can't Brady's mistakes, his interceptions, be actually a positive thing? But how could that be? Well, hear me out. If Brady made the bad play and got picked off, he dug himself into a huge hole. If he digs himself out of it and makes up for it, surely his level of difficulty is greater. Now, if he threw some picks and lost the game, of course that wouldn't work. But what if he threw a pick or two, but then balled out and won the game because of his elevated level of play? Is that not the highest level of difficulty you can think of? Of course, I'm not saying it's better to throw picks. I'm just saying that you can't completely trash Brady for throwing picks in the Super Bowl because he did dig himself out of it. Now, a quarterback's interception ratio is a stat that is poorly managed in my opinion. So many times a pick is caused by the wide receiver running the wrong route or not catching the ball properly and letting it bounce up in the air despite the pass being perfect. I think the stat itself should have considerations like these, like quarterback interceptions by fault of the quarterback and quarterback interceptions in general. And this is exactly why I think Brett Favre gets too much crap for his interception statistics. I wonder if you go back and look how many were his fault. Well, I'm sure a lot, but it would at least take his number down a bit. But how many times did taking those risks win his team the game? So some recklessness can be a positive attribute that all comes out in the wash, right? Or how about Aaron Rodgers' low interception ratio? That actually doesn't impress me. Aaron does not take risks. He cares about stats and looking good more than getting the victory.
Wants to look good first, win second. That is the most ridiculous piece of philosophical bullshit I have ever heard.
If his primary reads aren't open and there's nothing there that he thinks he can't roll out and bullet something in, he throws it away. He'd rather have an incompletion without an interception on his stats than to take the risk and maybe it gets intercepted. But maybe also he gets that 3rd and long and convert it and his drive continues. So the interception thing overall when it comes to Joe and Tom in the Super Bowl, to me, is a give and take for both sides of the coin. But I, of course, will still give Montana the edge on that one. Joe, you are the man. No picks, excellent, no question. Now, let's talk about how everything else works around them. System. Oh, that word, system. It's like a dirty word when you say this regarding a quarterback. Okay, Joe, like Tom, came into the league underdeveloped and underestimated. Both really had their wake-up call on the road to greatness once they started their first season. And what I mean by that is some guys come into the league on day one firing, and their game is clean and crisp, like Dan Marino or Andrew Luck. Both Brady and Montana saw the value of working hard and intellect as the way to get better. Of course, these guys had the basic physical tools to be a quarterback. That's why they were drafted. But it takes more, much more, and they knew it. For Montana, he lucked into the greatest situation a quarterback has ever been put into. His coach, Bill Walsh, who many consider the greatest coach of all time, changed the NFL forever. He is the inventor of the West Coast offense. Just to give you a basic understanding of it, now, if you want to learn more, I highly recommend the documentary A Football Life with Bill Walsh. But what Walsh created was unprecedented. He built an offense around step-based instructions. It literally was designed down to every last detail to where all the quarterback had to do was follow the steps exactly, and you could be an efficient quarterback. This style of offense back then could make mediocre quarterbacks seem very, very good, and very good quarterbacks seem excellent. And excellent guys like Montana and Young become elite. People like to talk about system quarterbacks. If there ever was a quarterback that fits the description of a system quarterback, it's Joe Montana. It's just a fact.
Bill Walsh brought art to the game of football. They created a system that 3 decades later,
that's West Coast offense all day.
other teams are winning Super Bowls with.
The 49ers were a philosophy as much as they were a team. Took a guy like Joe Montana and made him a perfect system quarterback.
He was the ultimate instrument, but Walsh was the virtuoso.
People use this phrase like it's an insult. All the great quarterbacks are part of a system, but they themselves are also the system interwoven. There's only been one guy, really, in the modern game who is the entire system, and that is the great Peyton Manning. And that is something that I give Peyton huge props on, and why I give him a high rating on my top 10 quarterbacks of all time, which we will reveal in the offseason. But even though Montana was in this system, he still had to have the IQ to get the steps correct, and the mindfulness to see the open guy, and the physical ability to get the ball there accurately. This isn't some secret or crazy hot take or accusation out of nowhere, okay? This isn't even opinion, it's a fact. Walsh's offense guaranteed certain receivers would be open. Walsh even knew when the wide receiver would be open based on the amount of steps the quarterback had taken during his dropback. This is how mathematic and orchestrated Walsh's offense was. If you don't believe me, take it from the three most famous 49ers of all time: Jerry, Joe, and Steve.
And so defenses couldn't respond.
Montana looking for the quick throw. Throws, complete to right.
The ball was coming out so much faster than it happened in the past in the passing game. The defenses, it did take 15, 20 years to catch up.
I think Bill Walsh was from another planet, to be honest with you. He was so far ahead. He simplified everything for the quarterback. They gave the quarterback options. He knows where his primary, his secondary, his third receiver. So it was very, very simple for the quarterback.
People like to say, well, Brady has had the same coach and Montana won with different coaches. Okay, that's true.
One of the things that Tom Brady's been the beneficiary of, too, is having the same coaching staff his entire career.
Montana did win a Super Bowl with George Seifert, but Seifert might have been coaching that last Montana Super Bowl team, but it was Walsh's team.
I think the best team the 49ers have had is 1989. We'd won the Super Bowl a year before, and George Seifert took over the 49ers when I retired. But that team was the same team we had.
That was the best 49er team.
One of the greatest all-time teams. I don't know who would have ever beaten that team.
Additionally, if you use that argument, you are indirectly discounting Seifert as a head coach. That means I should remind you that he won a Super Bowl when Walsh really was out of the picture. And he did it with Steve Young in a blowout of the San Diego Chargers. And his 49ers team disrupted the powerful Cowboys dynasty from getting 4 straight. Talk about level of difficulty. Let's not also discount Marty Schottenheimer, who Joe had in Kansas City. It's not like Joe was working under Jeff Fisher or something. Come on, people. Walsh is so legendary that every NFL coach calls his book the Coach's Bible. Think about that. It's a must-read for every NFL coach to have. That's how insanely awesome Walsh's innovation was. That's even used today. It's not just about the X's and O's. It's comprehensive, but it's also about how to run your franchise.
I am familiar with the book. I've read it.
This is an amazing book.
Practice schedules, off-season programs, draft, evaluation, everything is in this book right here.
What I learned from reading this book would be some of the things behind the scenes that, I would have no way of knowing unless they were explained to me.
As close to scripture as you can get for a coach, right?
It's the Bible of football coaching.
It's a great book. It should be required reading for every football coach.
This book by Bill Walsh is the greatest football book ever written. I swear to you. And it can be utilized in any type of work environment and any leadership role. If you command or manage people, whether it's the military, whether it's a sports team of any kind, or an office, a construction crew, whatever it is, this is a must-have. After reading it, you will wish you had found it a long time ago, I promise. It definitely gives you an edge against others. A major edge, actually, I would say. However, it's extremely hard to get your hands on. A hard copy will set you back all the way up to $450. Even getting a digital copy of the book is extremely hard to find, even if you're willing to pay for it. However, We did all that work for you. And you can have your very own digital copy of The Winning Edge by Bill Walsh. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel first and then join our group on Facebook. Simply comment that you would like to receive a copy of the book, and you will receive it from one of our admins within 24 hours, but usually it happens much faster than that. Now, the link to the Facebook group is in this video's description below, but don't forget to subscribe first. Okay, let's continue. Montana hit the jackpot. He had the right coach at the right time. Look at this ridiculous Bill Walsh coaching tree. No one in those days could hardly stop it. Defenses didn't know what to do. Walsh's offense put to bed the idea of a must-have steel curtain defense to win a lot. And that was unprecedented and even somewhat blasphemous to think that offense could be finesse and still win championships. Back then, you had to run the ball and play defense, and that was the way to win championships. Well, in comes Walsh, and he says, not anymore. And Walsh found the perfect guy to run that offense, Joe Montana. It was a match made in greatness, but not in heaven. But why do I say not heaven? Because firstly, the guy that played before Montana, Walsh, was actually higher on. But more to the point, Walsh was never fully satisfied with Montana. Bill was convinced that Joe needed to be pushed, and he needed to have his job threatened in order to get the best out of him.
But our problem is we have two, and there's a quarterback controversy developing. We're going to have to select between Steve Young and Joe Montana.
Bill was thinking, what I'm going to get out of this is the best of Joe Montana and Steve Young. And I'm not so sure that he wasn't right.
Tom Brady never needed this type of convincing. Tom is the same crazy, psycho, cyborg Tom during training camp, during the playoffs, or even playing ping pong. This point here would be a major negative on Joe in comparison to Tom. So Walsh brought over a very good player in his own right, Steve Young, to basically be a thorn in Montana's side. Walsh lied to Steve Young and told him he would have Joe's job pretty quickly, and that Joe was really banged up. When Steve arrived, he saw that Joe was perfectly healthy and playing well, and then he realized he had been hoodwinked.
Seeing Joe run out on the field the first time in 1987 in minicamp.
Pretty.
My first thought is, he's not hurt at all. Bill said he's had second back surgery, Steve, and he will not recover from it.
But this was to create a fierce competition and to get the best out of Joe. But the real truth was that Bill was of the belief that his offense was everything and that any capable quarterback could run it. Now, I'm not saying these guys are mediocre. That would be just stupid. I'm simply saying that Walsh, apparently, to him, didn't see an issue with changing quarterbacks and still believed the 49ers could win championships. Montana was in his prime when this was all going on. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, Belichick wanted to keep Jimmy G instead of Brady. Okay, I read Ian O'Connor's book about Belichick, and I can tell you that the majority of it is like a long Wikipedia page of quotes and stories that avid Patriots fans already knew from documentaries and other articles over time. The parts regarding Jimmy G in the book was entirely just speculation, assumptions, and a major lack of sources. One coach supposedly said something bad about Brady, saying that they thought they could win a ring with any top 15 quarterback. But the problem with that is that it doesn't say who said it. Well, great. We can file that under complete and utter bullcrap. Without a real source, it's just fantasy. Are we supposed to just take the word of a guy who authored this article? And now suddenly he's kissing Bill's butt in order to sell books and remain relevant? The biggest, most controversial chapter in his book has no sources. However, even if it was true, okay, let's just say it was true, it doesn't matter as far as the Walsh-Montana point I just made goes, because Brady is old as dirt in football years. Moving on from Tom to Jimmy isn't some crazy thing to speak of in a football way. What I mean by this is that it's not like Brady was in his prime, coming off his 2010 MVP season and then suddenly cast aside. but that's exactly what happened to Montana. Additionally, we heard rumblings of Jimmy G taking over for Brady all the way back in 2014 after that Kansas City debacle.
Will the quarterback position be evaluated this week?
How did Brady respond? By winning his team the Super Bowl. In 2016, more calls to trade Brady and start Jimmy G, partly because of Brady's Deflategate suspension.
What happens if Jimmy plays better?
Look, I told you what's going to happen.
So there's this.
Jesus Christ.
How did Brady respond? Another Super Bowl victory. In 2017, the whole Brady versus Jimmy thing was going on, and Jimmy was sent to the 49ers.
Would you trade us Tom Brady? And Belichick said, what did you just ask me? Did you just ask if I trade the greatest quarterback of all time? And John said, so is that a no?
Is it true that when you talked to Bill, you said, what about Brady? Is that true?
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. That did happen. I mean, he did shoot me down real quick. And, okay, if you're not going to give him up, what about Brady? And he nearly spit through the phone, man. You know, it was a pretty visceral reaction from him.
And Tom responded with regular season MVP and another Super Bowl appearance. And he even broke the record for the most yards in a Super Bowl. But Montana, he was benched. Once Montana's ride was coming to an end, he never returned to his previous form. After he was traded to Kansas City, he did perform admirably for them in the playoffs by taking them to the AFC Championship game. But they ultimately lost to the powerhouse Buffalo Bills. And that is a credit to Joe, absolutely. But come on, that's nothing in comparison to what Tom has done after doubts about him started. Do I believe that Steve Young wins those last 2 Super Bowls Montana did? Maybe 1 of 2. Yeah, but let's move on to another aspect, the quality of their own teams. Joe Montana was in the Super Bowl with some amazing 49er defenses. San Francisco owned the 1980s, it felt like. Sprinkled with a brief period of the Bears' 46 defense and Bill Parcells' Giants flexing their muscles. You can also sprinkle in some Redskins there. But for the most part, it was the 49ers. And it certainly wasn't all about the offense. Montana never made it to the Super Bowl without a top defense. Brady, he's done it many times over. People like to talk about Brady's defense being so great, and they like to bring up points allowed. Now, the fallacy in this is that it's not the entire picture. There's a reason the NFL uses yards allowed as their main stat to determine the best defenses. The points allowed thing didn't really start being talked about until people needed to fit their narrative that Brady had good defenses when there were times he didn't. Yards allowed is important because football is a field position game. Yards can tell the story of how much a quarterback can benefit from the team's defense overall. Hence, why it's used so often. And in this regard, Brady has taken some atrocious teams to the Super Bowl and AFC Championship games. What about turnovers? Is the defense getting Brady enough turnovers and more chances with the ball? But I'll tell you what I'll do is this. I will combine both yards allowed ranking and points allowed ranking, and we can create an average numerical value to give us some sort of idea of the difference and compare those side by side. Make sense? I hope so. I think this is fair. Brady has played, on average, with a defense that's ranked 7th in points against and 17th in yards allowed, giving him a defense numerical value of 12. The lower the number, the better the defense is. Montana has played, on average, with a defense ranked 6th in points against and 8th in yards allowed, giving him a defense numerical value of 7. So no matter what category you want to look at for defense, Montana has always had the better defenses. However you want to slice it, Montana benefited from the better defense and a stacked team. Now, let's move to offensive players each quarterback has played with. Montana had much better players on his side of the ball than Brady. We obviously know Montana had Jerry Rice, and we know that Rice wasn't a product of Montana only, because he had his best years in the 90s with Steve Young. Montana had John Taylor, who, if it wasn't for Rice overshadowing him, would have been considered in even higher regard. Now, Brady's early Patriots teams had good role players on defense and some really good elite talent like Ty Law, Willie McGinnis, guys like that. But on offense, it just wasn't there. He had grinders like Troy Brown, who often played two ways, and David Patton. Good, strong core players, but nothing that stands out like what Montana had. In my opinion, one of Brady's greatest achievements was taking that atrocious team of offensive players to the 2006 AFC Championship game. That team had absolutely no business being in the playoffs, much less only a few points away from reaching another Super Bowl. It took Peyton Manning's Colts at their very best to stop Brady, with a group of guys only the most serious Patriots fans could name you. I bet you can't name one. I'll help you. Rashae Caldwell, Jabbar Gaffney, and a very old Troy Brown. Come on. Now, Peyton, he was throwing to Reggie Wayne, Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison, Dallas Clark, and even had Joseph Adai in the backfield. Brady's receiving core was so bad, that's what prompted Belichick to go out and get Brady someone he could really utilize. Now, I have a riddle for you. If Tom Brady wins 3 Super Bowls and reaches 4 AFC Championship games with 0 elite players on offense, what would happen if you gave him just one generational talent player? The answer to this riddle is Randy Moss. The very first year you give Tom a guy like Moss, they shatter the record books and set the league on fire. And don't even think about bringing up Welker or Stallworth. They were very good players, but they did what they were needed for, but the Patriots made them. Welker was an afterthought. He was a guy who was brought in with hope that he could contribute some. Tom and Josh turned him into a household name. The same with Stallworth. Dante played on other teams and didn't even come close to what he was on the Patriots. It took Welker having to go play for one of the greatest of all time in Peyton Manning in order to keep up his play. Randy Moss is the only time Brady has been given a legit receiver on the level that Peyton got or that Montana got and so on. But he only got Randy for basically 2 seasons. What if Moss had been on the Patriots all of those years? What could have been, right? You give Brady Jerry Rice. What do you think would happen? Be honest. Now, to be fair to the Brady haters, I would like to give you that Brady had Gronk. Rob is clearly talented and would have been a good tight end anywhere in the league. I am certain of that. But as we know, Tom spent a lot of time without Rob due to injuries. Tom even won a Super Bowl without having him, which is insane to think about. Rob is a generational talent, and we're not going to dismiss him. But when it seemed that Brady was getting some nice gifts on offense with the duo of Gronk and Hernandez, it turns out that dude was a psychopath. Another what could have been. There was a time where I couldn't decide who I liked better, Aaron or Gronk. That's how good things were for Brady, and it was all taken away so quickly. Luckily, Julian Edelman stepped up his game, and after the departure of Welker and Hernandez, it was awesome. Edelman is a gamer and the toughest, grind-it-out type of player I have ever seen in my lifetime. But he's not Antonio Brown, is he? Amendola. Danny turned out to be a big game clutch moments guy, but even he will tell you he's a product of Tom. Listen to this.
You made a great point that if Tom Brady can win with mediocre scrubs like Danny Amendola, come on! I mean, what if he had a good receiver? But Colin, I'm going in my 12th year in the league, and I promise you, I'm a system guy. So
one season stands out to me like 2006, and that was 2013. That offensive group was another atrocious group of players. That was the year Brady pulled out that crazy comeback against the Saints and Browns and went all the way to the AFC Championship game, but it took the best offense in NFL history to vanquish Tom. That is just nuts. So many times Brady has done his job only for the defense to unravel in the end. Ask any Patriots fan, they will testify. It's the most frustrating thing about being a Patriots fan is the defense doing idiotic things. Of course, it wasn't always like that. But since the group of the early 2000s got dismantled from just elapsed years, it's just never been the same. The last 9 years has been much more mediocre defense than good defense. And thank God for guys like Hightower, Van Noy, Butler, Ninkovich, and other guys like that who really made their mark when they had to. Let's talk about eras of football because so many like to bring this up. A huge many of you, including Montana himself, makes the statement that the NFL is watered down defensively, and back in his day, a total Al Bundy thing, by the way, a quarterback knew he would get hit. Of course Joe is going to throw this out there. It strengthens his argument.
The better you are, the longer you play, the more susceptible you are to getting hurt. So
before I throw the ball, and the biggest thing is I know the guy behind the camera right there is not very far away, but he can hit me still after I throw it. Now you can't touch him. It allows you not to take those big old hits that really make a difference in your play and your ability to last long. I mean, I retired at 39. I probably, even as bad as I had, many injuries I had, I could have played another 2 years if I had one for one concussion.
You know, people talk about toughness. First, do you truly believe that somehow Montana is physically tougher than Tom Brady? A guy who is actually much bigger than Joe and a guy who rarely misses a game due to injury, with the only exception being 2008 when a cheap shot took his knee out? Yeah, Bernard Pollard, it was a cheap shot, you piece of garbage. When I watch the most famous hits on Joe Montana, the one thing I constantly see is Montana laying on the ground. He's like Vince Vaughn in Wedding Crashers.
How many fingers I got up? Come on, Pepe, how many fingers I got up? Oh, come on, I got 4.
Brady has taken hits like this, and some even harder, but Tom gets back up. Has it ever occurred to anyone that Joe is just much more fragile than Brady? If you truly believe that Brady can take hits now, but somehow couldn't back then, it's absurd. Just because you want to glorify your past like so many others doesn't make it accurate. The average size of players is way different now. Also, players are learning how to tackle cleanly. The hits are still there. They just do it properly. That hit by LT, that hit would be legal even today. Let's not forget the fact that just because it's a penalty to hit the quarterback in a certain manner doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Guys are willing to take the penalties to get a big shot on a quarterback. It still happens either way. But the biggest thing that will hurt your narrative that it's wussified is this. First, guys were saying things like the NFL was getting too soft when Montana was coming into the league. Think about that. They were saying almost the same crap you guys say now, but that was nearly 40 years ago. What this proves is that the accuracy of a person's opinion or how they see things is extremely flawed. But the biggest point here is that the amount of penalties for roughing the passer or holding or defensive pass interference, unnecessary roughness, it was all called almost just as often as back then. Weird, right? They were protecting quarterbacks during Montana's era a lot more than they protected Bradshaw. In fact, it opened up the doors for the West Coast offense and guys like Dan Marino and Warren Moon to just put up crazy numbers. That wouldn't have happened in the early Super Bowl era. So pump the brakes on the whole, the NFL was tougher back in your day. It's not as good of an argument as you think, and leaving the pocket is also a bad idea. Look at how many quarterbacks get injured outside the pocket. It's absurd. But everyone is afraid to even utter the words that Montana just might not be as tough as other quarterbacks. But if I still haven't convinced you, let's try this. Let's look at Joe Montana's contemporaries as far as getting injured is concerned. The 80s, when everyone seems to think it was a bloody massacre, somehow Dan Marino only missed 4 games. And that was in 1987, but it was due to his own fumbling of a snap and he dislocated his ring finger on his throwing hand. It had nothing to do with the so-called violent 1980s NFL. So basically, Marino never missed a game where he was named the starter in the 1980s due to how violent the game supposedly was. But take a look at the career injury reports for the entire careers of Montana's peers compared to him. They somehow were able to compete in the exact same era. Hell, even Elway played his entire career without an ACL. How crazy is that? Elway, of 256 possible starts, for his entire career, this is not just the 80s, the entire career, he played nearly 90% of his games. Dan Marino, for his entire career, out of 270 possible starts, he played 89% of his games. Now, we have Joe. For his entire career, out of 217 possible starts, he only played in 75% of his games. The dude missed 25% of his career due to injury, while Marino and Elway were only missing around 10%. Guys, this is a huge difference. So, why is it that Montana is hurt so often, but his contemporaries aren't? That's kind of strange, right? I mean, if the era was so bad and that's your argument to use for Montana against Brady, then what about these other guys? Marino stayed in the pocket, but he would take the hit in order to get the pass off. Elway, he'd leave the pocket just like Joe, but he still managed to play more games. Brett Favre, he played almost through the entire 90s and he never missed. During the era of headhunting, he still didn't miss, and neither did Drew Brees, Tom Brady, or Peyton Manning. Enough with the toughness thing, okay? Pass interference was also called nearly as often back in those days. This notion that it's weak in today's NFL is one of the biggest misconceptions there is about NFL football. But every time I watch a Montana game, it seems like it's only a matter of time before he's laying on the ground. Again. Both played really good defenses, and some weren't outstanding, but they were still okay. Like Joe played against a really good Broncos defense and destroyed them, hanging 55 up on Elway's boys, but he also won against mediocre defenses like both Bengals teams, and even the Dolphins weren't considered great or anything like that. They were pretty good though. Brady's defensive opponents? Well, he has that one bad defense that he played, which was the Atlanta Falcons. But of the average defenses Tom's faced, his was slightly better than the ones Joe did. Joe never faced a defense that was number one in the league across the board. But Tom did, the Seattle defense in 2014. And remember, this was also the Legion of Boom, the greatest, by far, greatest secondary group in NFL history. Let's not forget that Tom also faced the greatest show on turf offense, considered one of the greatest offenses ever. Joe never defeated a team that had either won a Super Bowl recently or went on to win one shortly after. Tom did it twice. The Rams were champions just 2 seasons prior to when Tom played them, and the Seahawks were the defending champions, who, by the way, destroyed the greatest offense in NFL history, Peyton Manning's Broncos, but Tom got that victory. There's something I want to talk to you about. It's what we call the vonallensports total team value score. And what we do is we add up 3 categories to get the average. So we take the sum of defensive points against and defensive yards against. Now the reason we combine both defensive yards and points allowed is due to the NFL's usage of yards over points, which yards also contribute, of course, to field position for the offense. But also we want to include how many points the defense gives up, because about half the NFL fan base believe that is what's most important. Although it is worth noting that no one even argued for points against until the Patriots started winning. It was used as an indictment against Brady. But next we take their team ranking. A team's overall record says a lot about a team. Like Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are. And finally, offensive points scored. The offense has one job, to score points based on the field position that defense and special teams provides them. So let's get started. Let's take Montana's Super Bowl opponents that he defeated. The 1981 Bengals. They were 12th in defensive points against, 12th in yards against, 2nd in the team standings. They had a quarterback who was MVP that year, Ken Anderson. They were ranked 3rd in offensive points. All this combined gives them a Von Allen Sports total team value of 5.66. Now remember, the lower the number, the better the team. The 1984 Dolphins. Joe faced these guys. They were 7th in points against and 19th in yards against. They were 2nd in the standings, however. They also had the MVP that year in quarterback Dan Marino. They ranked 1st in offensive points. That gives them a team value score of 5.33. So they're slightly better than the Bengals team. And Montana played the Bengals again in 1988. They were 16th in points against, 15th in yards against, 3rd in the standings. They had another quarterback MVP, Boomer Esiason, and they ranked again 1st in offensive points. And this gave them, of course, a Von Allen Sports total team value of 6.5. This was probably the team that gave the 49ers, out of all of Joe's 4, probably gave him the biggest fight. And now moving on to Joe's final Super Bowl, the 1989 Denver Broncos. Joe completely crushed these dudes. The Broncos were 1st in points against and 3rd in yards against. Awesome defense. They were 3rd in the standings. They ranked 8th in offensive points. That gave them a total team value of 4.33. So, strangely enough, this Broncos team that the 49ers blew out of the water, were technically the best overall team that Joe faced. Now, if we combine all 4 of Joe's opponents to get a final score, Joe played on average a team with a value of 5.45. So let's remember that number. Now, Brady's Super Bowl opponents defeated the 2001 Rams, greatest show on turf. They were 7th in points against, 3rd in yards against. They were 1st in the standings. They had a quarterback MVP, Kurt Warner. They, of course, ranked 1st in offensive points, giving them a team value of 2.33. This, of course, will be by far the best team out of all the teams faced. Then Brady played the 03 Panthers. They weren't really a huge standout during the regular season, but in the playoffs, they seemed to just turn it on. But they were 10th in points against, 8th in yards against, 7th in the standings, and only ranked 15 in offensive points. Their total team value, 10.33. The 2004 Eagles, led by Donovan McNabb and Andy Reid, 2nd in points against, 10th in yards against, 3rd in the standings, and ranked 8th in offensive points. This gave their total team value of 5.66. The 2014 Seattle Seahawks and Legion of Boom, number 1 in points against, number 1 in yards against, number 1 in the standings, defending Super Bowl champs, and they were ranked 10th in offensive points. Their total team value, 4, an even 4. The 2016 Atlanta Falcons, their defense rankings, wow, I didn't even realize they were this bad. 27th in points against and 25th in yards against. But somehow they still found a way to be 4th in the standings. They had the MVP that year, quarterback Matt Ryan, and his offense ranked 1st in offensive points, giving him a total team value of 10.33, just like the Panthers. The 2018 Los Angeles Rams, 20th in points against, 19th in yards against, number 1 in the standings. They were ranked 2nd in offensive points, and their total team value, 7.5. To get the total overall value of all of Tom Brady's opponents that he defeated in the Super Bowl, it gives us a 6.69. Joe, 5.45. Pretty dang even, right? Now, unfortunately, Joe couldn't make it to more than 4 Super Bowls. Otherwise, we could be more accurate comparing game by game. But since Brady has more than doubled Joe's appearances and completely eclipsed his Super Bowl wins mark, what happens if we choose from Tom's 4 toughest opponents defeated? If we did that, Brady's toughest 4 opponents has a score of 4.87, 1 point better than Joe's. Of all the opponents Brady and Montana defeated, Tom faced the toughest, the 2001 St. Louis Rams' greatest show on turf. They weren't just offense, they were a solid team all the way around. The Patriots were 2 touchdown underdogs in that game. 2 touchdowns in a Super Bowl. Tom also faced the best defense of all opponents defeated, the 2014 Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom. The lowest his team has ever scored in a playoff game is 13 points, and that was only just recently when he was old as dirt and faced Wade Phillips, one of the best defensive coordinators in NFL history. Keep in mind that Tom was 3-0 to start his career in Super Bowls, which is only 1 game short of Montana. And it took the most miraculous catch of all time to take out Brady in his 4th one. One, I should point out, where Brady had the go-ahead touchdown drive only for his defense to give it up to Eli freaking Manning. You people act like not throwing a pick in 4 Super Bowls is some type of superhuman feat that's just impossible. Well, I've got some bad news for you. Brady can match all of Joe's performances and still have room to spare. Why? Because he didn't let his team down in the playoffs before getting to the Super Bowl. He's never been blown out in a championship game like Montana has. Tom left himself room to pick from. This is a positive, not a negative. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to show that what Montana did isn't as crazy as you think. So for every Montana game, I will match it with a Brady Super Bowl game that has a similar type performance. I have lots to pick out from all of Brady's Super Bowls, but unfortunately Joe only has 4 appearances to Tom's 9. But let's get started. Montana's first Super Bowl, 49ers versus Bengals. Joe had a very average performance. He wasn't exactly slinging the ball around the field. Joe had only 14 completions, a very low 157 passing yards, 1 touchdown pass, and a 1-yard quarterback dive, something Brady is also famous for. Brady's first Super Bowl is actually very similar to Montana's first. Tom had a very average performance as well. 16 completions, 2 more than Joe, but 145 yards only, 12 yards less than Joe, 1 touchdown pass, and orchestrated a game-winning drive with only a minute left. Neither of them had an interception, and at this point, both are perfect. But if I really want to help Tom's case, I have a backup to spare. I can go ahead and slide in Tom's performance against the Eagles in Super Bowl 39 when he had 23 completions, 236 yards, no interceptions, and 2 passing touchdowns, which would even the touchdowns Joe had. So take your pick which game you want to match with Joe, because either one works. Joe's second Super Bowl against the Dolphins. He had 24 completions for 331 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and no interceptions. This one, I think, was probably his best performance overall. I'm going to match this with Brady's second Super Bowl against the Panthers. Brady had 32 completions for 354 yards, 3 passing touchdowns with only 1 interception. Now that interception gives Montana the edge. But if we consider that he had more completions and yards than Joe, and then he had the clutch game-winning drive, I think that helps. They also both had similar defenses. These 2 games are really close. Joe's third Super Bowl, again against the Bengals. This is the one famous for the long drive at the end of the game, capped off with a touchdown pass to John Taylor. Now on this day, Joe completed 23 passes for 357 yards and 2 touchdowns. No picks, even though the Bengals dropped an easy one in the end zone. Joe threw a horrible ball into heavy coverage, but we already talked about that. Let's go ahead and match Tom's Super Bowl against the Falcons, the famous come from behind game. But the reason I included this one is because with Tom's 1 interception that was a pick 6, I thought it was a reasonable balance. Brady had 43 completions for 466 yards, 2 touchdowns, but then he orchestrated the greatest comeback in NFL history. Down by 28-3 near to the 4th quarter, and he had the game-winning drive in overtime. But Tom got more points on the board in this game, so overall I like the pairing here. Montana's sports Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos. He took with him into that game a fantastic defense with a 3.5 overall value. This game was never really competitive. Joe blew the Broncos out. His overall stats weren't gaudy, but what sticks out is his 5 touchdown passes. Joe threw for only 297 yards on only 22 completions, but he had no interceptions. Now, I want to match Tom's game against the Seahawks. In this one, Tom faced about 1,000 times better team than Joe did. This Seahawks team, known for the moniker Legion of Boom, was one of the best defenses we've ever seen. Although Brady threw 2 picks in this game, he passed 50 times, increasing the odds. Keep in mind that all of Joe's Super Bowls, his attempts are much lower than Tom's, which lowers the likelihood of throwing an interception. Tom had 37 completions for 328 yards and 4 touchdowns. With all factors involved, I think these 2 performances match up well. So we've established that Brady has a game for each of Montana's and even has one performance that outshines all of these. However, his defense was completely putrid and gave the game away. Tom lost to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017 despite throwing 28 completions, a record-setting 505 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So how was Brady on the losing side of this game with a stat line like that? That's a major indictment on Belichick's decision-making in 2017. It's fair to say Walsh or Seifert would have never benched one of their players on defense a few minutes before the game. Tom can claim 4 games without throwing a pick, proving it's not that crazy or insane to do it. Brady showed winning several straight isn't that unique either by winning his first 3, only 1 shy of Montana's 4. And people act like Joe was the first person to get 4. He wasn't. Terry Bradshaw was 4-0 and did it in the 70s. But the point here is that Montana's 4-0 record with no picks isn't some type of godlike performance that no man can touch. Brady has done it, just with more games to spare. The more games you play, the greater the difficulty. If Joe played in 9 Super Bowls, he would have thrown a lot of picks and he would have lost a few of them. You know how we know? Because the Giants bullied him in the playoffs on 2 different occasions, so they were beatable. And for the Giants, sometimes easily beatable. Tom has never taken the kind of embarrassing losses Joe has in the playoffs. Not throwing picks has proven to be an overrated stat in regards to winning or losing in the Super Bowl. Brady has 2 Super Bowls where he didn't throw a pick at all, but he lost the game both times. And both due to Brady getting his team the lead with a 4th quarter go-ahead touchdown, only for the defense to give it up. Brady did his job, but it still wasn't enough. But the point here is that he didn't throw any picks. There's been so many instances where Tom would risk the interception in order to get the pass completed, and it turned out to be an amazing, important first down or touchdown. So with those risks, you get rewarded as well. Let's also talk about salary cap. Now this is a big point here. In the 80s, if you had an owner who was willing to spend the cash, you could have an all Madden type team. Seriously, you could stack the deck with your pocketbook. You could guarantee you don't lose any of these awesome guys. If there was a salary cap back in those days, a huge chunk of those guys get traded or signed somewhere else in free agency. You don't think after the 49ers' 3rd Super Bowl that teams wouldn't have been willing to pull back the Brinks truck to get them? This was proven in the 90s when the salary cap was first introduced and the 49ers pried Deion Sanders away from the Atlanta Falcons, and they won a championship. But then Jerry Jones comes and he wants Deion at any cost, and Deion helps the Cowboys get another ring as well. In the 80s, Deion never would have left Atlanta. Brady winning in a salary cap era versus Montana is a point that cannot be overstated. The salary cap was introduced so bad teams could compete. It was designed to not allow dynasties anymore. They basically wanted to participation trophy the league. What Brady and the Pats have done is absurd. A dynasty? In a time where the deck is stacked against anyone going for a dynasty? And not just one. Brady has been a part of 2 separate eras. It's absolutely unthinkable. And when Roger Goodell came in 2006, his sole mission was to create more parity in the league, so he doubled down on that whole thing. Why do you think Spygate was such a big deal? The Patriots pick in the bottom of the draft every season. They never get top draft picks. And don't give me that Brady has an easy division. First, that's a myth. And second, because the Patriots end the season as the division winner, the schedule calls for them to play all the other division winners every season. So every year for the last 10 years, the Patriots had to play the best the AFC had to offer. Hardly a cakewalk.
Big number here. Montana, 0 scandals.
That's true.
0 controversies.
Wow.
And cheating scandals. Montana won its Super Bowls without a single cheating scandal.
Oh, really, fool?
The Patriots were caught spygating in 2007. Only in 2015 did ESPN publish a report where 40 former Patriots players, coaches, and employees admitted that they were spying on other teams all the way back to the days of their first Super Bowl championship.
And you're fake news. You have an agenda.
SportsCenter incorrectly cited a 2002 report regarding the New England Patriots and Super Bowl 36. That story was found to be false and should not have been part of our reporting. We apologize to the Patriots organization.
Super Bowl number 4 came at the hands of the infamous Deflategate incident.
U.S. District Judge Richard Berman ruled NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell went too far.
The bottom line, essentially, the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is full of hot air.
And here we go. Get this. Associated Press now reports Tom Brady has beaten the league.
That's 4 unearned championships. Didn't Montana win his 4 without cheating? Yep, the cleaner the better, Montana wins.
So you want to blame Brady for Spygate? Guilty by association or benefit, is that it? Okay, well first I just want to say that as far as Spygate and definitely Deflategate, I will discuss those in later videos and will show the truth about just how absurd they were. But for now, I just want to focus on the working theory that Brady's career has cheating and scandals and Montana is clean, right? Because after all, and I'm talking to all of you haters out there, it's all about purity of the game, right? The game must be clean. Integrity of the game. The greater glory of the NFL. Rah, rah. Well, ugh. Okay, well, if you are that self-righteous and you can't possibly support or enjoy any athlete or team whose integrity has been called into question, you will want to hum some nursery rhymes or something to yourself while I do this next part. That way, you can remain in your fairy tale world instead of the real world with the rest of us. In this world, here's the truth. Bill Walsh not only did whatever he could to gain an edge and an advantage, he reveled in it. Who do you think made famous the manipulation of headsets for the opposing team? Ask Bill Parcells.
We knew they scripted plays. Well, we lost the toss in '85, and we knew they were going to get the ball, and then all of a sudden their phones went out. Now, you know, the league mandates you got to put your phones down when the other team's phones go out. So it was just a coincidence that they got these plays scripted. They know what they're going to do, and then their phones go out. We were kind of, I don't want to say caught off guard by that, but we had to make some very quick adjustments. I kind of thought that that was a little bit calculated on their part. Getting ready to play them the next year in the playoff. And I said to Bill, these phones go out again to start the game. I said, I'm going to expose you, okay? He looked at me with a little wink and he says, just a little gamesmanship. And I said, I understand.
Now, I wonder if this gave Montana a competitive advantage, guilty by association and benefit, right? Remember, we have to keep the same standard you applied to Brady and Belichick. But what else? How about Montana's offensive linemen greasing themselves down so the defense couldn't grab and push off them to get to Joe? I'm sure Joe appreciated not being sacked as often. Was this cheating? Yes, absolutely. And way more beneficial than a tick less of air in a football.
Are you at all suspect of what the Patriots have done over the years? And is it wrong to question what they've done?
Well, they always say if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So they're trying hard.
You guys ever step outside the rule book? I mean, Jerry has said, hey, I use stick 'em every now and then.
Everybody, like I said, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. Everybody does everything they can to possibly get a little bit of an edge. I mean, back then, it was illegal if you had, like our guys used to spray silicone on their jerseys, the linemen, so that the defensive lineman couldn't get a hold of them, and the defensive lineman did it, so the offensive line. It's just the...
Didn't Montana win his 4 without cheating?
It's a game. Right? Everybody wants to win, and so you do whatever you can to make it happen.
But there's more. Spygate? Guess what? Everyone was doing that, and Walsh was one of the biggest users of this technique, which I will quickly tell you wasn't even illegal until the year 2007. So, Montana benefited from this no more or less than Brady would have. But there's even more. Now, for you 49ers fans and NFL purists, I guess, this one is going to hurt.
Hall of Fame wide receiver Jerry Rice, who played in the NFL from '85 to 2004, admitted on Saturday that he used stickum during his playing career, which is a small problem because stickum and other adhesives have been banned by the NFL since 1981. Rice tweeted the following Saturday night. I apologize, people. After doing my research about stickum, the NFL banned this in 1981. All players did it. # equal playing field. Well, Hall of Fame receiver Chris Carter, our colleague who played from '87 to 2002, sent out several tweets over the past few days indicating that he strongly disagreed with Rice's accusation that all players used it. I never used Stickumgate, and Jerry Rice isn't speaking about me or for me. God made my hands. He put Stickumgate on them. Never a need to use anything but my God-given talent and perfect it with a jugs machine. If he used Stickum, JR, referring to Jerry Rice, was cheating.
Jerry Rice using illegal stickum on his gloved hands gave the San Francisco 49ers at least as much of an advantage as allegedly the Patriots have gotten from slightly underinflated footballs. At least as much advantage, since he was, by all accounts, the greatest receiver of all time and the driving force behind 2 of Joe Montana's Super Bowl victories, and then he went on, obviously, with Steve Young. So,
I wonder how many catches he had from Joe that he cheated to get. Don't talk to me about cheating when it comes to Brady versus Montana. It's a joke. Montana and his teams get a pass because it was done in a different era. An era when champions and greatness was put up on a pedestal. Okay, let's talk personal. Montana knows Brady has surpassed him, okay? You can see it in the change he's made in his attitude towards Brady. When Brady was stuck at 3, Montana sang his praises because he didn't feel that his status as the GOAT was at risk.
Yeah, I think the thing I like about him is they've been able to do it with different teams. The thing with him is he's still got enough age on him that he can probably get back here another time or 2. So it'd be fun to watch him.
He's a Hall of Famer in your mind.
Oh, yeah. He didn't have to, long before this. I mean, you got guys who've done not anywhere near what he's accomplished that made it in the Hall of Fame. So obviously he's long past that.
Do you think Brady feels like he's better than you?
Oh, they all. If he doesn't, he should.
I like that though.
Yeah.
That you respect them if they feel that way, that they should feel that way.
Oh yeah. I mean, every time you walk on the field.
What's more impressive, your 4 or the fact that he's been to 6?
Well, I think getting there is hard. I mean, no matter what. I mean, the unfortunate thing is
people forgot that Jim Kelly went to 4 straight, and so getting there and winning is important, but getting there is just as hard. Winning is difficult too, as Tom will tell you, or anybody who's been there. But I don't know. I don't really look at it that way.
After Brady got his 4th and tied him, Montana started to change a little. After the 5th, Montana really did a disservice to himself in his interviews. He changed his approach to the question about who's the GOAT, and it became this bizarre philosophical thing about guys previous to him winning a bunch of championships. This is disingenuous to say the least, and embarrassing at most. He uses the same quote over and over, saying,
even before he got 5, you look back to some of the guys and some people don't even know, Sammy Baugh or Otto Graham. Yeah. I can't remember which one, but one of them won like 7 or 9 championships.
Wow.
Before, and so far ahead of their time, and it's hard to compare guys from then to now.
Really, Joe? Really?
You go back and look at, I always say, go back and watch Sammy Baugh and Otto Graham. I can't remember which one of them won like 9 or 10 championships.
Yeah. You never bothered to look up and find out which one you're talking about? It's Otto Graham, by the way, and it's 7 championships. But he knows it's Graham already. He says that because it sounds nonchalant, and it's dismissive to the notion of GOAT in the first place by saying that.
He's got 5 rings, going for 6. As I mentioned, you have 4. I'll ask this with all due respect. Is Tom Brady, is he the GOAT?
Well, I've said this for many years. It's hard to beat Tom or say that he isn't. But when you go back and you look at guys like that, I was forced to look at because I went up against a couple times for some awards, a guy named Otto Graham. Here's a guy who won 10, 11 championships. And before the Super Bowl came around,
it makes him seem humble and above it all. But he knows better. This ridiculous attempt at humility was completely destroyed by his wife when, after him saying this exact thing for the millionth time, his wife spoke off the cuff and said,
I still can't say that of my, even though people say it and I appreciate it, I still can't say that of myself because of, just what I said. It's hard to
That's not what you, at home you're saying that. I love you. That was fabulous.
And don't you forget it.
We are reminded constantly.
Wait, well then, what just happened? Joe's reaction was priceless. He was embarrassed. His wife clearly didn't understand the nuances and subtleties of his bullcrap that he was doing, and though she just thought she made a cute joke, but it revealed a whole lot and made her husband look just as petty and egomaniacal as every other professional athlete that's ever lived.
But so I think it's just all call him the GOAT.
That's it, right?
That's true. Yeah. Make him make the noise too. Is that right?
Well, it means he knows Brady's the GOAT. Otherwise, he wouldn't feel the need to resort to such ridiculous statements. After all, he wasn't mentioning these old guys, nor did he commit to all this double talk until Brady passed him. Oh dear.
What? You think there's someone else? Prove it.
One guy utilized the system, as in he had to have the guys around him. Bill Walsh orchestrated that, called those plays. The other guy started out a little more in a conventional offense, as in Brady. I played against Brady. But then it changed to where it was about Brady. Let's spread them out. Randy Moss came into town, and let's throw it 40 times a game. Joe Montana could not do that.
If you enjoy any of the music in all our videos, check the description. It will have a link to the artist. And most importantly, thank you guys so much. And if you have a video you would like us to do, just put it in the comment section. If we use it, we'll make sure to give you absolute credit for the suggestion. Also, guys, if you would like to argue more and get more of an immediate back and forth, go to our Facebook group, Von Allen Sports. Join that group. There you can post whatever you want. Tell me what you think. I'm there all the time mixing it up. Give us your best shot. You think you can debate better than Max Kellerman or Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith? You think you're better than them? Practice it. Show us what you got. Bring it.
Let me kick a field goal.
It's a 40
You good on the field goal?
Yeah, we're getting the field goal.
40-yarder. Game's over. Yeah. All right, let's go.
Field goal, Steve.
Von Allen Sports.